Hey everybody, Tim here with TP Pipes back in the shop for part two of my video series on how to make a pipe with the bare minimum tools. In part one we covered some of the tools that you'll need, and I won't go back over those because I covered those in part one. So if this is the first video that you've seen, go back and watch part one to cover some of the basic tools that you would need for pipe making. For part two, we're going to talk about making a pipe if you don't buy a pre-drilled block. And again, in part one, I mentioned you can save yourself a whole lot of headache by starting out getting the pre-drilled blocks or pre-drilled pipe kits to make a pipe with. That's how most of us pipe makers started out, and you'll save yourself a whole lot of headache if you start that way. If you don't want to start that way, you want to do it all by yourself from start to finish, don't want any help with it, God bless your soul, but we'll talk about how you can do that. When you get a block of briar and it's not a pre-drilled kit, this is what you get. They come in different shapes according to what kind of pipe you want to make, whether it's a straight or a bent pipe. This block would be for a straight pipe. It doesn't have much wood up in here to be able to make a bent pipe out of it. So this block would be for making a straight pipe like this one here. You can see the pipe follows the shape of the block of wood. If you're starting with a block that's not pre-drilled, the first thing that you'll need is some kind of drill, obviously. You can use a cordless drill. Where'd it go? Okay, sorry about that. You can use a battery powered cordless drill. You can one that runs off AC power, runs off an outlet out of the wall. Once again, the hardest part about making a pipe that will smoke good is getting those holes, the chamber and the draft hole, drilled correctly. So it's possible to use any kind of drill you'd like, even a hand drill, if that's what you'd like to do. I'm not going to say that you'll be able to make a good pipe that way, but you could use any kind of drill that you wanted to. If you want to do all of it by yourself, as far as a drill, the very minimum that I would recommend is a benchtop drill press. I'm not going to try to turn the camera around and show my drill press. I've got a floor model drill press, but I think I'd say you could probably get a benchtop drill press for under $200. And with the drill press, you set it up to where the table and the quill of the drill are squared with each other, and it will make being able to drill the holes in the pipe a lot easier. Okay, so if you're going to do your own drilling, you need a drill press or some type of drill. You got to be able to make the holes. Some of the bits that you'll need, and I highly recommend using these. They save a lot of time. The first one I would recommend is called a hole saw. The hole saws are normally used in metal. They can be used in woodwork too, but they're normally used for making the hole. So if you've got a piece of wood and you use this, the round part that would be in here is the part that's waste. They're used for making that hole in a piece of wood or metal. But for pipe makers, we use it for right the opposite purpose. If you got your block of briar and sitting on the drill press, and you use this bigger one and you drill down to about, hard to figure out how to line stuff up on this camera. You drill down to about right there, and that gives you the top, the round shape of the top of your bowl. Then there's smaller hole saws, like this one right here. And what you do with it, you turn the block around on the drill press, and you use this, turn it around this way, to drill the shape, the round shape of the shank for your pipe. Starting at the end, you come in and drill until you get right before the bowl, and that gives you the round shape of the shank of your pipe. In other words, you'll be drilling that right there. That gives you a perfectly round shank without having a lathe to be able to do it with. And you can get these in all different sizes. Excuse me. Just keep in mind when you go to buy these, that these are sized by the outside diameter rather than the inside diameter, because that's what they're typically used for. If this is a 2-inch, so it's 2-inch diameter on the outside. If you're buying it for pipe making, measure it and see what the diameter is of the inside, because that's what you're going to be left with for the size of the bowl of your pipe, the outside diameter. And again, the bigger one would be used to get the shape of the bowl, drill down to the shank. And then the smaller ones are used to get the shape of the shank. And you drill right up to the bowl. The next type of drill bit that you'll need is something to drill the chamber with. Typically, most of us start out with what's called a spade bit or a paddle bit. And if you go to the store to buy one that hasn't been modified, this is what it will look like. This, without being modified, isn't worth anything for pipe making. What you have to do is buy one that's already modified, modify it yourself, or take it to somebody that is able to modify it for you. And this is the factory, how they come. And then what's done is it's put on a grinder or sander, and the tip of it is rounded so that when you drill the chamber, hard to figure out how to hold all this stuff. When you drill the chamber, you have a round bottom in the bottom of your chamber for your tobacco chamber. So obviously this one with the point still on the end of it is no good for pipe making. But you can take these and modify them. And again, that's called a spade bit or a paddle bit. You get these in different sizes. I think probably the most common chamber size is 3/4 inch. This one just happens to be a 7/8 that I picked up. If you're handy with metalworking, you can make your own. It's what I used until I started making the spoon bits. I used these for about 3 years making pipes. They work just fine for the average pipe maker. Unless you're making a lot of pipes to sell, then you might want to consider getting a spoon bit. The next kind of drill bit that you'll need is called a brad point bit. If the camera will focus, you look at the end of that, you can see it has 2 flutes coming out on each side, and then a sharp point in the middle. Come on, focus. There we go. The reason you need one of these for drilling your mortise is, number one, so that it will have a relatively flat bottom, so the hole will have a relatively flat bottom. Just using this spoon bit as an example, when you drill that mortise, you don't want the bottom of it to be rounded. You want it to be squared off or have a flat bottom to match up with the end of your tenon, so that you don't have a big air gap in there to catch all the gooey gunk moisture from the tobacco smoke. The reason for the little sharp point on the end of it is that is the first thing that touches into the wood, and it helps this bit to stay straight, keeps it from wobbling, so you get a good straight hole for your mortise. Probably the most common mortise size is 5/16 of an inch, and that's what this bit is. It's a 5/16 brad point bit. Okay, the next one that you'll need is called a Forstner bit. Well, you buy these blocks of briar, and when they come, they are not square. They have to be squared up. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you can't take a stem that has a square surface here, and when you get your hole drilled, put it up against that without having some way of squaring the end of this block. So what you do, when you've got it in your drill press or lathe, and this end is not square, you use this Forstner bit to simply, you're not actually drilling a hole with it. All you're doing with it is using it to square up the end of that shank. In other words, if your shank is slanted like this, when you clamp it in the drill press and drill with this, all it does is make the end of that square, square and flush, so that when you put the stem in, there's no gap, airspace between the stem and the end of the shank. And again, that's called a Forstner bit. That's what it looks like from the side, and that's what it looks like from the end. And again, it's similar to the brad point bit, it has a little sharp point on the very end of it. Okay, another tool that you'll need, I mentioned that the blocks don't come square. You can see on this block here that this corner, this corner has, as part of the outside of the burl, and it's not square. There we go. You can probably see it better that way. So you need a square to be able to square this block up. You can see the little gap in the corner down there, hopefully. With the square, you can mark your lines on the pipe and then use your saw or sander or files or whatever you need to use, depending on what tools you have, to get that block of briar squared up before you start any of your drilling. If you don't get the block perfectly square, and I can't stress that enough, if you're drilling your own pipe, you need to get the block square before you ever start drilling. If not, you'll never get the chamber and the draft hole to line up right. But once you get that block squared up, these little combination squares have a little nut underneath them so that you can adjust the end of that in or out. How that's handy is, once again, when you get that block squared up, you can put a pencil right at the end of that you can set it for half the width of the block, and you can follow the end of that with a pencil to mark a line from that side, and then do it from this side, and you have successfully marked the exact center of this block of wood. And that way you know exactly where to drill. And you'll do that you'll do that all the way around the block. And also you'll do it from the other direction to find the center for your chamber this way. That way you'll have a crosshair mark, the center this way and the center this way, and then you'll be drilling your chamber directly in the center of that block. Another thing that you'll need is some kind of wood stain. I didn't cover that in the first video, but you'll need some kind of wood stain. This is what most pipe makers use. The brand is Fiebing's, and it's labeled as leather dye because originally when they made this, that's what people were using it for, was to dye leather. So, but this is the kind that most pipe makers generally use. It's alcohol based, which means when you put it on there, it only takes just a few minutes, 15 minutes at the most, for the alcohol to evaporate off, and then all you have left is the pigment of the stain left in the wood. You've seen probably on some of the YouTube videos the guys that put the stain on the pipe and then they light it with a lighter or put it over a candle to light it. That's more show than go. That doesn't serve a whole lot of purpose. Not that I have not done that. I have in cases where I've had a difficult time getting stain to blend. But generally speaking, that's just for show. No need to light it on fire. If you use an oil-based stain like Minwax, some of the brands like that you would typically use on wood furniture, they are a regular oil base, and they will take forever for that stain to dry before you can finish working on the pipe, before you can do any more sanding on it, before you can wax it or anything. So whatever type of stain you choose to use, make sure that you get one that's an alcohol base. Okay, I should have covered these in the first video and I didn't. But one other type of file that you'll need is called needle files. And this is just a little set that I got picked up at Walmart. It's not a great set, but I wanted a spare set of needle files. This isn't the set that I typically use, but and the files inside it are in different shapes: round files, flat files. This one is a flat file, but they're very small and very thin. And the reason that you need them is for doing your stem work. The little flat files are good for working the button area of the stem. There's one in there that's an 1/8 inch diameter, tapered, kind of like the rat tail file, Mr. Rick. Where it's good for is filing, opening up the draft hole, airway in the stem. Your pre-drilled or pre-formed stems generally still take quite a bit of work. The hole, they're come from a flash mold. They have flashing on the outside that has to be sanded off. Hopefully you can see that a little bit, the flash mark there. The insides of them are not smooth, so the little round needle file is good for sanding the inside of the stem. The other one in the set is probably the most handy. If I can get it out of here. It's a flat file very thin, about a 1/16 of an inch thick or less, and the end of it is tapered. And where you'll use it is in the button end of the stem. Most of your preformed stems do not have a very wide V in the button end of them, so you'll use this little flat file with a tapered end to get in there and file out and smooth out the button end of the stem to open up that airway. So needle files. Another one, and I don't have one out here in the shop, but another thing that's not terribly expensive that you can get that will help tremendously is some type of rotary tool or Dremel tool. I think probably most of you are familiar with the Dremel, and the types of cutters, grinding wheels, stones, sanding pads, and whatnot that you can get to go in a Dremel are endless. So you can use a Dremel for a lot of different things. They even make some small drill bits for Dremels. So that's another tool that I would recommend highly if you want to make pipes, and if you can afford it at all, to get you a Dremel. So the two most costly tools that we talked about tonight are the drill press, probably under $200 for a benchtop model, and a Dremel. Third most costly will probably be your drill bits. So if you want to do your own drilling, that's the bare minimum tools that I can think of that you can get by with. Again, some of the other pipe makers may have some different ideas or thoughts on that. And if so, feel free to add your comments below the video here. Would like to mention one last thing. Again, going back to the pre-drilled blocks. I get the majority of my materials from Steve Norris. His website is Vermont Freehand, and I'll add a link to his website below the video here in the description. And he carries the pre-drilled blocks and is very reasonable on his prices on those. So once again, my highest recommendation is start with the pre-drilled block. Give Steve Norris a holler and let him hook you up with some and make some sawdust. All right, everybody. That's it for part 2, and I'll be working on part 3 and get it up as soon as I can. But hope everybody has a great day. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. And that way I'll know everybody is enjoying enjoying the videos, and that'll give me encouragement to keep making them, help people out. All right, thanks a lot. Tim here from TP Pipes, and we'll see you next time. Okay, that'll be all the tool talk for these videos, and in part 3 we'll actually get into seeing how all these tools that I've talked about are actually used for making a pipe. So hopefully this will be all the part that's so boring, and in the next video in the series we'll start seeing how some of these tools are used for making pipes. Thanks a lot, everybody.